The nation's capital is preparing for a heavier than usual law enforcement presence on the street after President Trump mobilized hundreds of federal officers and then federalized the Metro Police there, also activated the National Guard, all of it citing what he says is a crime emergency in the nation's capital. And by the way, by now you've probably heard the standard fact check, and it is true. The president claims that violent crime is out of control, but it is, at the time of us talking right now, you hear my voice, trending downward, according to analysis done for CBS News by the Council on Criminal Justice. So since D.C. crime rates peaked back in the summer of 2023, the data shows that homicides are down 65%, carjackings are down 75%, assaults with a gun are down 61%. And this year, year to date, things are down as well. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser called the federal intervention unsettling and unprecedented. You've heard that quote. That happened yesterday. So, but at the very same time, no one's arguing that 187 murders last year is a great thing or 1,000 assaults with a deadly weapon is a great thing. So what's the definition of an emergency? And why is the president so concerned right at this particular moment about crime in Washington? And the National Guard on the streets, what are they actually going to do? There's a lot of conflicting data on this and a lot of questions I think need answering to help us understand what is a very strange turning point in the Capitol's history. We've got national security contributor Sam Vinograd. Sam, thank you very much for joining us. I've gone back and forth on this news for the last 24 hours, thinking to myself that it's scary and then thinking to myself that it's not scary. And I don't really, understanding the president's powers. D.C. is a unique place, though. It's not an independent city. It has home rule under this unique law. But talk to me about how the president is able to federalize a police force, because you just hear that phrase and you think, well, that doesn't sound good.
Is definitely unique, Tony. So the president's really doing three things to fight what he's calling a crime emergency here in Washington, D.C. First, under a 1973 law known as the Home Rule Act, he is using D.C. Metropolitan Police for federal purposes. In effect, he's federalizing the police here in Washington, D.C. He can do that for 48 hours, and then that can be extended to 30 days if he makes certain notifications to Congress. At the same time, he is activating the D.C. National Guard. The D.C. National Guard, interestingly, is the only guard unit out of 54 that reports directly to the president. So he does have the authority to directly activate them. And then, as you mentioned, he's increasing the presence of federal law enforcement officials here in D.C. The latter group, the federal law enforcement officials, will more than likely be focused on protecting federal facilities.
But when you hear about the National Guard, Sam, it calls to mind images of teenagers thrown over the hood of Humvees with guys in camo handcuffing them. Is that what the Guard's going to be doing? What's the National Guard's role here?
Well, the National Guard historically has been used mostly for responding to natural disasters and even deploying overseas in times of war. The National Guard was activated here in D.C. by President Trump after the murder of George Floyd and the protests here in D.C. They were activated in the summer of 2020. The Army yesterday said that the National Guard would more than likely be used mostly for administrative and logistical support for local law enforcement, the Metropolitan Police Department, and could also be used at certain traffic stops and checkpoints for deterrence purposes.
All right, so Sam, you're such a good person to talk to because you ran law enforcement policy at DHS and worked on coordinating law enforcement for D.C. in particular. The executive order of the president said that crime in the nation's capital is, quote, out of control. It says that there's, quote, rising violence. What do the statistics show?
The statistics paint a very different picture. As you mentioned, Tony, at the top of the show, violent crime is down significantly here in D.C. And if you just look at the FBI crime statistics, there are a ton of cities around the country that have much higher violent crime rates than D.C. Memphis, Tennessee, for example. And Adriana, it's worth noting that in my experience, calling in the National Guard for law enforcement purposes is a last resort, not a first step. It's a last resort because the National Guard doesn't have training typically to work in urban environments, not to mention the optics of bringing in the military. Instead, police departments can call in help from neighboring jurisdictions. They have mutual aid agreements that can be leveraged when crime is out of control. So there were other steps that could have been taken prior to calling in the National Guard.
I guess the president will be judged by the results now, right? It's now his problem.
All right, Sam, thank you so much. That was today's By the Way.